So I did a Rick Barber maps video on his Gettysburg maps, and somehow completely forgot to include the Longstreet attacks map, which Longstreet attacks is one of the blind swords systems games from Revolution Games on Civil War battles, and Longstreet attacks is about Longstreet's attack on the second day of Gettysburg on July 2nd. And Rick Barber did the map for this as well in a sort of zoomed in version of the Gettysburg maps that we looked at earlier, which had the whole Gettysburg and surrounding region. This is a very much more zoomed in map of the area of Longstreet's attack along the Union left, along Big Round Top, Little Round Top, the Peach Orchard, and up the Emmitsburg Road towards Cemetery Ridge. So I can't believe I completely forgot about this. I was like, I feel like I'm missing a Gettysburg map that Rick Barber did, and this is one of them. And you can see here, it's got Rick Barber's trademark font, if you will, and there's his mark, his maker's mark, if you will, 2018, this map. And this has the same sorts of hallmarks that we saw on the other maps, the textured coloring, the detailed cross-hatching, the hand-drawn trees, the calligraphy pen script. And it looks like this has most of, all the farms and stuff are all called out as well. One thing that I had pointed out in the others was that he didn't call out things like the wheat field, but you can see here the wheat field is definitely called out on this map. And there's the Stony Hill, which he did call out. He called out the Stony Hill, he called out Houck's Ridge on other maps. Also called out the Valley of Death, one of the post-battle landmarks that he actually did call out on the other maps, even though he didn't call out others. There's no specific mention of the Peach Orchard here. It's just the Sherfy Farm at this corner here. There's the Trossel Farm, which was Sickles' headquarters, the Weikert Farm, Stony Hill, the Rose Farm. So this does have that same level of detail. Now I feel like the positioning of things is a little bit different than it was on the other maps. This is set, in a very rectangular way that seems to be like on other maps. The Stony Hill seemed more like over here, and everything seemed more tilted that way. But the maps are adjusted, or the angle of the maps are adjusted in order to fit the game. In this case, one single map that will fit all of the relevant units on it. And I'm just looking around for if there are other, this does have Powers Hill, Swisher Farm, Weikert Snub. Interesting. So this is like kind of Cemetery Ridge, runs along that way. And you've got, of course, Big Round Top, and you can see set at this scale, it looks a little different. At the other scales that we saw, Big Round Top entirely encompassed, just a handful of hexes in a much more rounded shape. Here it's given the scale's a little bit different. It's expanded more into surrounding hexes. The same can be said for Little Round Top. Devil's Den, still mainly just one hex. You can see the boulders there. It's interesting that he doesn't color in the boulders. You can see here, you just get an outline of them, but they have that green background color. He hasn't colored them with gray or anything. I'm not sure. And that's the case with all the stones, like throughout the Valley of Death. And this is very rocky, and the rocky slope of Little Round Top, very rocky terrain. But he hasn't colored in the stones, possibly because that would be just, one step too far in terms of visual busyness, and you would have difficulty seeing what the actual underlying terrain is, or seeing the hex numbers and so forth. As I mentioned in my other video, Barber's maps definitely straddle that line between visual noise and functionality. So that may have been something he decided to do, to not color in the stones, but still draw them just as a way to show that they're there without adding more visual noise to the map. And speaking of visual noise, now we can look at the Thunder in the Ozarks map. This is another Revolution Blind Sword Systems game. This is the Battle of Pea Ridge was it in Missouri? I believe it's in Missouri. Or Arkansas. I think it's Missouri. Western Theater battle. And this was in March of 1862, and so you can see the trees that he's drawn here. Some have leaves, some do not. There are, it's going to be still pretty sparse in March. Everything's going to be, most of the trees are going to be bare. Things will have just started to bud at this point. You can see he's got the fences in for the fields and so forth, but the same thing, that textured coloring, his typical font. But here you can see all of these the forested hexes are, forested, but he's drawn trees appropriate to the season where it's just branches. These are all bare trees. And he's kind of colored in some potential other trees and underbrush that would have leaves. But for the most part, it is largely a barren landscape. But otherwise, all of the other hallmarks, the heavy cross-hatching on steep slopes and so forth. And one thing, his maps are very focused on the hex grid. His illustrations are tied to the hex grid. So as a result, that's why you have things like, well, isn't Big Round Top round, isn't it much more rounded? And same thing for Little Round Top. Oh, this would be rounded, but everything, when it's on a hex grid and the way he's drawn it, it looks like, oh, it's plateaus. Everything's angular. Everything is exaggerated and lengthy and angular. There's no real round or circular shapes on here because you are tied to a hex grid. This is Stonewall's sword. This is, and here's that was Thunder in the Ozarks, which is, again, Revolution Games Blind Swords. Same thing here. Stonewall's swords, the Battle of Cedar Mountain. More of the same here. He's got kind of a field drawn out. Here you can see the trees have leaves, much like Gettysburg, unlike there where it's more bare trees. So that's pretty cool. Hey, there's the wheat field again, but this is the Cedar Mountain wheat field, the brushy field. Yeah, so very similar style here. The color's a little bit darker on this map, and I'm not sure when Cedar Mountain was fought. Did it say? It's definitely not fall, and it doesn't say in the cover the same way that the Thunder in the Ozarks says March 1862. So I don't remember when Cedar Mountain was fought. I believe it was also fairly early in the war, possibly 1862 as well. But much smaller map. But you can see all of his maps very just visually dense. Just when you pull back and look at them, they provide a very colorful and visually arresting view. compare it to something like, I've got Proud Monster Deluxe set up over here, which is Eastern Front, and this is a, I don't know, this might be a Mark Mahaffey map. Just looking at the, oh, this is Todd A. Davis does second edition graphics, so I don't know if he did the map as well, but, you know, just look at the much more bland layout of this. Not as visually dense as Rick Barber's maps. So also in my other video, I had mentioned that he did some maps for the battles from the Age of Reason series. This is Brandywine at Germantown. And I've actually played Brandywine and did some video on that earlier, so people may have seen this map before. But here is Rick Barber doing battles from the Age of Reason maps, and you can see this is a much different color palette than his Gettysburg maps. There's the ground here is the classic, similar to what you would see in the Labatai series of maps, which is the empty terrain or the plain terrain, again, just regular old open terrain, is a cream color, is blank. So, you know, all this stuff. And then, you know, he has the Rick Barber illustrations, the cross hatching for steep, severe slopes, some lighter hatching for gentle slopes, you know, roads and things with details around them. And again, you know, looking at these maps too, everything is exaggerated into the hex grid, so everything looks very plateauish and angular. There's no circular shapes and stuff. It's all on the hex grid. So they're going to be very exaggerated looking maps. And these are Clash of Arms. So this is different. This is like Summer Storm. It's on that nice knobby, heavy, textured paper that Clash of Arms uses for their maps. That's so much of a joy to move counters around on. And also a little bit different than his, you can see here that's his, you know, calligraphic kind of script. But this is a little bit different, but very, very evocative of 18th century stuff, which is pretty cool. This, and, you know, nice compass rose, hand drawn. All this looks great for evoking the period. You know, you've got all of the buildings filled in that have all kind of an 18th century illustration. There's Cliveden, kind of the only remaining part of the Germantown battle. This is all part of urban Pennsylvania, or Philadelphia now. So all you can really visit of the Germantown battlefield is the old manor house at Cliveden, kind of like right around in here. Otherwise, it's all modern street grid. But again, all typical Rick Barber, very visually dense illustrations. Same thing here, Battle of Brandywine, written in this awesome kind of, you know, quill pen looking illustrated map style, which is really great. And you know, Rick Barber's, his calligraphy pen stuff looks the same way. It's like something somebody wrote with a feather pen in the 18th century, which is great. So this map, the Brandywine map, very big. It's got, I guess you could do a 2-map version, and then it has these kind of 2 little extended maps on it. I believe when I played it, I played the full deal that had the extended maps as well. You can go back and watch my videos. Those are some of the earlier videos that I did from back in 2016, I believe. I did those right around the time I was planning to travel to the Brandywine battlefield, and we were going to Philadelphia. So we looked at the Brandywine battlefield sites and the Germantown battlefield sites, and additionally went to the Monmouth battlefield in New Jersey. But I was playing this game of Brandywine, which the first of the Battles of the American Revolution series games that I played. And talk about jumping into the deep end. It is the largest game, I think the largest map in the Battles of the American Revolution, or Battles of the Age of Reason series. And also I think the first that they did that was actually from the American Revolution. There are other battles, most of which are not from, you've got Leuthen here, which is like 7 Years' War. Libositz, yeah, first battle of the 7 Years' War. There's Monmouth, Fontenoy, Prague, and Molwitz. So currently only 2, Monmouth and Brandywine Germantown, from American Revolution. They're supposed to be working on another one that was covering battles in the South. I forget, like 7 for the South or something. I don't know. And I don't remember which of these other games in this series actually have Rick Barber maps. It's possible that there's 1 or 2 other ones that do. Leuthen, possibly. The earlier games in the series, I think, do. The later ones, I believe, don't. But these are definitely Rick Barber style of maps. He was definitely involved with the graphics. But yeah, just so many great, just little details there of these farmsteads. And here, just a little village, more farmsteads. Where, would you need to include this many buildings for this farmstead? Did Nat Palmer's farm near Brandywine have this many buildings? He figures, there's probably a house, there's probably a barn. It's likely that there would be, and I don't believe it would be slave quarters, since this was fought in Pennsylvania. But various outbuildings and so forth. So just the things, just little details of individual buildings and stuff for all these. Are these based on any historical fact that we know of? With Rick Barber, at least around Gettysburg, probably yes. Around the Brandywine battlefield, who knows how much of this is just sort of artist interpretation of, there were probably, a farm of this era and if it was, he might know whether it was a larger property or a smaller property, so larger properties would have more buildings, smaller properties would have fewer. So just, he probably made decisions like that while he was illustrating this. So, just full of rich details. And look at how he did the streams with all those little tributaries. Again, just very, could be visually noisy, but also very visually pleasing to look at. There's little things there. Meeting House Hill looks like there's a cemetery or something there. So just full of rich detail. As I mentioned before in my other video on his Gettysburg maps, he is a storyteller as much as he's a map artist, and his maps definitely tell stories. Just, zooming out on these on the table, they are just visually rich and look great on the table. Some people may complain about playing on them. I want all NATO symbols and everything reduced to abstract symbols. I don't care about illustrations. My maps don't need to be evocative of any particular era. I simply want to be able to play and push my counters around and do all the math in my head and do all the numbers and have it all reduced to equations. My view is you could just play the entire game on a spreadsheet if you wanted that. I want to be immersed in the eras of the battles that I'm playing, and I want to feel like I'm looking at something of that era and performing actions that soldiers and commanders would have taken during those eras. I don't want everything reduced to numbers and spreadsheets and simple bland graphics that just simply convey information and don't convey any sense of mood or ambiance or theme. So Rick Barber's maps are that gateway to evoking a mood and a theme of any game that you're playing. So again, he was a singular talent in this hobby, and he will definitely be missed.